All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the May 1st Finance Committee meeting. We are not being recorded, or we're being recorded. We're not live. Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. So, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email anyone that's here. And present is Joe Edwards, Scott Fry, and myself, Marla Ayler. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it. It's not that, some of them will be pretty quick. I believe the December 22nd minutes are the last one we need to approve. Is that correct? Marla?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't check with you guys, but I thought that was the correct one.
Yes.
So, if we can get a motion to approve those minutes.
So move.
Second. Okay, and I agree. I'll say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. All right. So then just jumping right into the budget process, when we look at the RDC, one of the things that I want to focus on obviously is having a better budgeting and reporting process. Because in the last couple of council meetings, I know there's been some confusion as to whatever the bills or this or appropriations, et cetera. And I don't want to get into the weeds on that. But if I can, I mean, just to make it really simple, when the budget gets approved or appropriations get changed or whatever those cases that may be, I think one of the easiest things to do from a finance perspective is to email every city councilor and say, these have been adjusted, or this is where we're at, or this will need to be paid. We don't have the money here. We're going to do an appropriation here, just so there's no confusion. Again, I don't want to get into the whole weeds of the bill paying, because obviously, we've done something one way for 15 years or 12 years or whatever. And now we're changing that. So the city council is not going to approve those bills any longer, which is not a problem.
I think they'll still show up on your docket. According to the clerk, they can't export them from that without it showing up, so.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So they're gonna be on the docket, but we won't approve them.
Right.
It'll just go through the court treasurer.
The money still comes out of the RDC.
Correct. They're
Correct.
approved at the RDC as they should be. They show up on your docket. I think you can approve them. There's no problem with that. It doesn't have any bearing on whether or not.
It's simply on our docket as a pass through.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So then I'm gonna pass it off to you, Scott,
Sure.
on the,
So, yeah, just very quickly, and again, because of some of the, I don't want to say confusion necessarily, I don't want to use that word, some of the back and forth with RDC budget, all this kind of stuff. Excuse me. I thought it'd be appropriate to take a look at maybe how some other folks do it. And one of the things that I'll tell you, I'm not a big advocate of, hey, city X, Y, or Z does it this way, therefore we've got to do it this way, or they don't do it this way, therefore we can't do it that way. I'm typically not somebody that pushes that thought process, but if somebody's doing something well, why not take a look at it and see what we can do to maybe mimic that in some form or fashion. So if we take a look at the Greenwood RDC, what's available to the residents there, and again, ultimately that's what this is about, is looking at it through the lens of the residents, right, the taxpayers. They can take a look. They've got all this information online. And again, I'm not going to get here and go through the RDC budget for Greenwood, but I just want to show you some examples. They've got all the information. If you'll just kind of scroll through there quickly, Chris, I'd appreciate it. They've got all the information that we have, but they've got it broken down into some really nice graphs that are kind of quick and easy to look at for the taxpayers. Again, this is all available. This is done on a monthly basis, actually, from Greenwood. And it's a click of a button. And full disclosure, let's be honest, 90-some% of the taxpayers probably will never take the time to take a look at that. But maybe 98%. But for the folks that want to see it, it sure would be nice if we had something, maybe similar to this, and we use this as a guide or a template of not necessarily how we have to do it or should do it, but what we could do to make things a little bit more transparent for the taxpayers. I think that would probably be something worth looking into.
Yeah, I saw one thing on there. If you go back one slide, two slides, I guess. Okay. bank and investment interest, I think that is reported to the clerk's office now as a gross figure. It would be allocated to, in these reports, it would be allocated to the RDC. Is that correct? In other words, that's where that money comes from.
If it's TIF dollars that are invested, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just something simple. I mean, when we talk about transparency and accountability, I think
That's
something like
that's a
this.
pretty simple report, but
Yeah.
yet it tells a pretty good story. And
Yeah.
And all this stuff is pulled from NAV, so
Yeah.
we would lean on the clerk's office to do the report, but I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
That's great.
And you guys could always, if you wanted, I mean, if you want, you can always add notes and stuff saying, hey, this is what we're looking at coming up and that sort of thing. I mean, so.
Yeah, I think ultimately that breaks it down into something a little bit less intimidating for the casual user to take a look at and say, okay,
Yeah,
this makes sense to me.
yeah, because most of the time I'd say the majority of people will gloss over the numbers because they're just like, I have no idea.
Overload.
Yeah, so, okay.
Just something I thought I'd reference that, you know, I thought, like I said, Greenwood is doing that well, and maybe we can take a couple notes from them and see what we can do.
Okay.
That's all I've got. I just wanted to point that out.
All right, awesome. Okay, so let's just turn our attention to investments. And this goes to not only Court Treasurer's office, but anyone else. So most of you probably saw First Republic, was taken over by the feds this weekend. JP Morgan is actually taking over their assets as of this morning. So it's our third bank failure. We're seeing a lot of outflows. Obviously, there's the risks are inherently in the investments. It's the timetable. So, the mark-to-market accounting. So if a bank actually buys, 4-year paper, but they're giving you out an interest rate at 1-year rates, which are actually higher because we have an inverted yield curve, it's actually causing consternation with some of the small and local and regional banks, and that's a problem. So one of the things, and the reason I've been paying close attention to this, so with the library, they did a bond issuance and they have there's a lot of cash, and so this is what happened. So they sat down at a committee to meet. To invest the money into treasuries, which I thought was a good idea. Unfortunately, one person on that committee then decided that they didn't want to do that even after the committee agreed to it. So they unilaterally, actually they checked in with Cheryl and said, hey, instead, I'm just going to put it into a money market in the bank and get 4.75%. Sounds fantastic, right? The problem is that 4.75%, you don't know how that's invested, the underlying investments of that 4.75%. Now, I don't want to, the bank's a local bank. That's great. In fact, I have no issue with that. The difference is if you get 4.75% on a money market, which is great, you are actually more secured in a 4.75% in treasuries. Just as simple as that. And this individual who's on the library board unilaterally made the decision not to invest in treasuries.
so basically what he or she did was say, this is going to be subject to whatever this local bank invested in.
That's correct.
And
And so it sounds awesome, right? That we're getting 4.75%, but the underlying investments of that bank, and I mean, the unintended consequences of what we've done in monetary policy across the US. And I'm not trying to bring the macro picture into it, but it is true that it's now impacting our local banks. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is not to bash this person on the library board, although that you can't create a committee to invest money and then not do it. And then unilaterally decide that, hey, in fact, you want to roll the dice to get a better investment spread. If that makes no sense. So the reason I'm bringing this up is more also from the court treasurer's office perspective. We need to be looking at our investments and understanding what we're invested in and what our underlying investments are, so that we're protected, because treasuries are treasuries. They are highly liquid. And it's not dependent upon the bank's outcome. It's actually dependent upon our national government's outcome.
I think one thing that's gonna happen too, is there's gonna be a lot of pressure on smaller banks to show us that these things are good investments, not, circus
Well,
things.
so it's like the market accounts, so it's what happened, with my gosh. I'm having a 54-year-old moment here. With the S name in California.
So, or script something,
I was gonna say sovereignty, but it's not, it's anyways,
it's the internet.
synchrony.
Since
Was it synchrony?
No.
Anywho. So is what they're doing is they're saying that they went out on the spectrum and bought 4 or 5 year notes, right? But, and then gave their customers basically, higher deposit rates. But the problem is the rates are higher currently in your 4 to 8 month note range than they are in the 4 to 5 year note range, or 3 to 5. So the problem,
It started running on the banks.
yeah, so it's what happened is, when they marked that down on their balance sheet, it looked as though the banks didn't have money. The truth is, those banks would have held those bonds and investments till their maturity, and nothing would have ever happened. But again, the unintended consequences of the Fed meddling and not dictating those spreads has caused part of this problem.
Well, this pressure is gonna come to more local banks, I think.
I think it already is. You can look at, and even, I don't think, we don't have investments there, but like, even Citizens Financial, I work with Huntington even on a business, my business standpoint, and I know we do also through the city, but, a lot of these banks, are feeling pressure and getting a lot of outflows. So, it's just something we need to be aware of, how we're invested. I don't know. I think that's important.
Well, we can't, it's just part of good government to not let something like that happen.
Well,
That's poor government, for one person to say, it's my way or the highway.
well,
That instance, of course.
yeah, fairness, my wife's on that board and she's part of that committee. And basically, once the library board appointed this committee to oversee it, and then they all met and they agreed that this is what they were gonna do. They're gonna buy treasuries. And then this one person said, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go and invest in a different way.
And the committee let that happen.
No, they didn't know. My wife,
Didn't even know.
no, my wife didn't know. And then when she found out, she went to Cheryl and said, Cheryl, we agreed that we were gonna do this. And Cheryl said, well, he said he was he was gonna do this. And she said, well, we already agreed to invest it this way.
He gets pushed around.
And so, I'm not trying to minimize, or I'm not trying to sensationalize what's happened, but that's a bad idea, under anybody's life.
From the city
It's a
perspective,
bad process, correct?
we partner with OW Crone, Jim Tree specifically, and his team work with Cindy in the clerk's office for any dollars that we do invest. So much of our money is not invested, but we do invest. And recently have started investing more and more and are seeing a good yield on those. But it's, from my understanding, into CDs and more secure type investments.
Yeah, I know some of it's in money markets, and that's really where that concern
Have
gets.
you looked at where the investments are? For
I have not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get a report on that.
If it's the same as what we were, 5-6 months ago, the last time I truthfully looked, we probably need to revisit it and understand where we're at, because just like you guys know, the treasuries are just much more liquid. You wouldn't think you think the money market would be liquid at the bank, but it's turning out that some of these banks, that's not what.
So Marla, do you have any idea what we are currently investing in?
The bulk of them at this point are short-term municipal treasury bonds. We do have some investments with Goldman Sachs that has that higher yield that you're talking about, but I'm not exactly sure what those are. So that'll be a new education and kind of what all these different investments are, but we do work with Jim Tree before we invest the money,
Sure.
one, to make sure we don't need it liquid. I've been looking at investing in Indiana Trust.
Yeah.
Which has a pretty high yield, and what's great, there's like no penalty for early withdrawal on it. So, yeah, I want to get more involved in the investment side, but it's a big world.
Yeah.
And then,
Little tricksters.
yes.
Yeah.
There's also, the Association of Professional Treasurers, which they have a conference coming up, but I didn't honestly want to spend the city's money and go until
Yeah,
we figure out who's going to be
right,
the next investment
Yeah.
officer.
yeah,
So, that occurs, I think, in June or August. I don't know. I need to look at it. I just have
Yeah.
kind of set it aside, but, yeah, would love to get a better education on where all those monies are. But we'll touch on investments
Yeah.
a little bit, in the report I've prepared for you that we'll talk about later.
I think what Andy said is, like, on the processes, not to have bad process, I think it makes sense to actually write out systems and processes for this procedure. And not that we've had this issue obviously in the past, but just with what's going on. And right now it's 3 banks or what, a dozen banks sort of. So it's not, but you never know. I mean, you just never know. And that's why I put this on there, because I thought we probably ought to put together systems and processes to review investments, probably more so than me looking at it, every 5 months or 6 months. Because obviously in our business, I mean, we look at this all the time, but it's something that we should probably, I don't know,
I agree, and I hope we, in that process manual, identify dollars that we can invest as well. We have quite a bit of cash sitting.
yeah,
Road impact fees, for example, there's $10 million. We started the year with $10 million, knowing we're not paying the bill for 32 until October. Well, it's just sitting in a bank account.
yeah,
I would love to see those dollars invested. I mean, Indiana Members has got a 13-month, 4.75 CD right now.
yeah,
Put $5 million in that,
yeah,
right, for the next 13 months.
yeah,
Things like that. And we, the city, would love to be a part of that. We can identify dollars that could be liquid, that could go into investment. It's something that John Rogers has worked on for years.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So the only thing I would say is that in the past, CDs have been great, right? Because we
Yeah.
understand that, hey, they're protected, but in this instance, they're actually potentially not.
Sure. And
So,
you
which is
can
odd.
look at other ways.
So that's why,
If anything over 250,000 is.
yeah, so for me, I'm coming back and saying, well, the treasuries are the most liquid.
Mhm.
And the amount that we can get in the yield in treasuries is really pretty good, especially in that, again, I said probably 4 to 6. I'd say even that 3 to 8 month window of treasuries is actually higher than the 2-year yield. So, I mean,
One thing we don't currently have is a defined and approved investment policy. We have had it on certain things that we were doing, but not like a broader policy. Would you be willing to look at a couple of different policies that I've
Yeah.
gotten from different places and kind of help find?
and I think like, this committee, working with you and Jeremy, to get this set, or whoever's the court treasurer is, that needs to be set, and even like Jeremy said, if we have $10 million sitting there, we should be putting, now I don't know what the yield is, but what we're getting on that account.
If we're getting 1%, it's more than what we're getting right now.
Right, yeah, so,
So not only do we need the policy, right, we need the procedure and the policy put together, but we also need written into that, the review of those policies, of those procedures, because as we know, things change over a period of time.
Changes.
what's going on right now is fluid. I mean, it could change tomorrow. I mean, literally, over the weekend, this whole thing with First Republic, think about that. First Republic stock was at 120 in March. This morning it's at 276. I mean, so we don't want to be one of the people that's sitting in something there that's not gonna get paid.
Well, lack of management brought that about.
Well, it's the whole thing we've done nationally on the Fed. I mean, we're tightening, I mean, you know, I mean, not to get into it, but M2 monetary supply is actually decreasing for the first time actually in a long time. And it's all because we're trying to force ourselves into a recession to some extent. I know they don't want to say that, but that's what we're trying to do to get some of the inflation out of the economy. So anyhow, the unintended consequences of that, and I know we probably spent a little more time on that, but I thought it was some important.
So let me ask him, I think we're all in agreement that, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's what needs to be established. What's the next step? What's that look like? How do we start embarking on that?
So this is what I would say. Let's get a list of all our investments currently, maybe by the end of the week or just ASAP, you know, and figure out where we're at and what we're investing in. And not just, hey, we're in a money market. What's that? What is that invested in? You know, I mean,
But part of that also has to be also identifying the funds that are available for investment that are not currently invested.
yeah, I would say first find out what we got, and then second, what we're sitting on in cash, and then, you know, where can we go with
The
that?
funds that we're responsible for.
Yeah.
We can say, hey, we don't need this till here, we don't need this till here, and then you can work with the clerk's office to decide where
Yeah.
it should be invested.
I just want to ask you one question though. The library funds, if they go splash or something happens, I don't know that.
Well, it may not. I mean, nothing
They
may
shouldn't say that, but who's responsible to clean up the mess?
I have no idea, to be quite honest. I don't know that
They're
we,
kind of
I mean,
self-government.
they're their own taxing entity, so they would have to come back through the same process that they did in order to get the bond issuance. If they fall short, you mean, because of
Yeah.
a bad investment,
Yes,
I would assume that it would be the same process as they do when they are issuing debt.
and I'm not saying that that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the system and process can't be like that.
Yeah. I agree.
if we're part of the process, we gotta make it the best we can.
We're not part of that.
We're not part of the library.
Correct.
Like, we
Yeah,
have nothing to
you
do.
do nothing to do.
Yes.
It's what happened there is what caused me consternation on.
Well, it'd be like if you as a committee came up and said, we're gonna do this, and then you, Troy, decided, no, we're gonna do that.
Right.
I don't think you guys let that happen.
No,
So I don't know how that works. I don't know.
Well, if I said, hey, let's exclude Scott Fry and Joe, I'm gonna do this instead. And Joe's not knowledgeable about anything financials.
We'll watch you on the purple.
Yeah. I mean, it's just goof. I mean, it's just, anyhow, okay. All right. We're pretty clear on all that stuff. Okay, budget process, focus areas for 2023, city departments, public safety, health insurance, et cetera. So one of the things I've been going through budget of last year and looking at where we're at currently for this year. And obviously, one of the areas that I obviously want to hit is health insurance. And we have all the time in the world. We're starting in May. There's significant savings that, you know, we identified.
Potentially, yeah. We're doing an analysis right now, with that NFP and AIM to analyze the AIM trust compared to what we currently have from a self-funded perspective. Because the numbers that they gave us, and after we had to commit to a renewal, we got to dive into them a little bit. Didn't necessarily include prescription. They didn't include, the services that we pay for at Riverview Hospital for preventative maintenance, so that don't hit our insurance. It's the whole point of that focus. So we're gonna get a real robust analysis here in the next month or so that way we have some runway to make a decision on which way we need to go.
Okay,
And I can bring that information back here.
yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of the other areas, so, and I'm thinking through, Caleb's report, kind of in conjunction with,
Mhm.
with the budget process. And so if we maybe kind of combine 9:15 and 9:30, maybe together here a little bit. So one of the things that, you know, and I have it pulled up in front of me on the projections is that, I'm not certain that those projections take into account, the corporations that are rolling off the property tax bills, and maybe they are, or maybe they're not. But from the number of, I believe he said there was 9,000 permits, and obviously they're not all getting built this year. Or 9,000 housing starts in his presentation. Does that sound right?
9,000 housing starts within what period?
But, well, that's what I'm saying. It's over a long period of time.
And the other.
That could be 10 years.
So we're still doing right now, we're still doing about 100, approximately 100 building permits per month.
Yeah,
It hasn't dropped off.
yeah,
The single family residential is not at the same trend as it was last year, but it's still significant.
yeah.
I think we still hit 1,000 for the year, but we're on track with building permit issuance as we were last year
Yeah.
and the previous year.
And Kai said at the Bridgewater event last week that we're basically on the same track corporate wise as the prior year as well.
Yeah.
So just kind of thinking through that and looking at these numbers. I think they're, you know, could be wrong. I mean, but they seem to be short, and obviously there's some change possibly in calculation in 2025. But it basically has our total revenues going through, 2028 at 10%, at a growth of 10% from where we are today. And that seems very light to me. Based on
Is that because of the levy cap?
that changes in 2025, I believe, 2024, 2025, correct?
The levy
The levy.
dropped
No.
down to what, 3%?
Yeah. So there's legislation that we've had a growth quotient adjustment for the last decade, and then after the 2020 census, starting this year, we were no longer qualified for it.
Yeah.
We've been fighting a good fight at the State House to try to get an exception to that, all the way up until Friday when they closed. So we are not gonna get the extra growth quotient, at least until the next census, and
Okay.
probably not forever. We're too big to meet the 150% growth requirement over a 10-year period.
Okay,
So that's likely gonna go away. I don't know how much of that is factored into there, but the sustainability report, now that we know what's that we're not getting the extra, the sustainability report will come out soon, and it has a financial advisor's view of what those projections are.
yeah, I thought that's where this came from.
It could be, but it would be last year's. It would be
Right.
either 21
We
or
have to
20.
take into effect this legislation this year.
Okay,
We gotta factor that in.
okay, so we're basically stagnant in tax revenues through 2026. That's what this projection is. And that's why it just, even with the building, it seems low to me. I mean, but,
Yeah, we can get into that with Greg Garitas and John Rogers that live and breathe it, and
Yeah.
they can explain some of those things. I think the
You're
numbers
talking
that.
about property tax revenue,
yes, yeah, sorry, yeah,
because we have other sources.
you're right, yeah.
Correct, and yeah, and our rate is declining, which is factored into there too. One thing I don't know if that does is if it fully factors in the growth. And 10% seems right to me. We had kind of this anomaly year this year with 24% growth. We'll probably see another big year next year, and then I think you'll see it start to taper out.
Yeah, cause I mean, based on this, I mean, we're showing very little growth at all from this year to next year, which doesn't, I would think would not be the case, but I mean,
80 growth in total.
yeah, it's not much at all.
Yeah, yeah, I would.
And it's declining in 2025.
Well, Garitas is gonna present.
Garitas gonna
When?
present, if we have a second May meeting, it'll be at that one. If not, it'll be,
June,
yeah.
So he'll be able to answer some of that.
Okay, okay,
And they have a more in-depth dive. That's really Caleb's work on properties. Theirs is the financials, factoring in the laws and some of the same type of projections.
okay. So, obviously, when I saw this, I'm thinking, we have our expenses growing exponentially higher than we do our revenues. And that's why when I started looking at this, I'm like, okay, something may not be right. And not to point this out, and this is not to point fingers at Andy or anyone else. In 2013, there was an IBJ article that said, hey, we're at, 65% residential, 35% corporate tax revenue. And that's unsustainable. And here we are 10 years later, and we're even further, towards the red.
We have never been 35%, absolutely.
We've stayed pretty consistently like 85 to 15.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's some article in the IBJ I was looking at, and so,
our ratio of commercial is quite a bit less than Carmel's has always been kind of
yeah,
the goal
yeah.
as to their ratio of commercial to residential.
Yeah, what, interesting, so one of the things last week, in that meeting at Bridgewater, and kind of this report, obviously, there's more office space in Fishers and Carmel, right? And so one thing Steve Latour said, he said, we get a call once a week that we need more office space up here in Westfield, and I didn't say anything, but I thought, this is not the time to add office space. If you look at office space vacancy rates, they're absolutely horrid. I mean, so that's not what. I mean, you can't, right now, you can't build it and rent it and have any kind of profitability. I mean, you better hope that the second or third owner has pockets. Sure. Because the first guy's not gonna make it.
So kind of tying on that a little bit and going back to the report that Caleb put together. First of all, the report was, I thought was
Oh, yeah.
very thorough,
Yeah, he did a good
outstanding.
job.
And I told him at the time that I needed to connect with him and make sure that I have a good understanding of exactly what he was saying there. And shame on me because I've not taken the time to do that just yet. But one of the things that jumps out was really the relatively limited amount of space that we have available for that type of growth in our city.
You're talking about commercial?
Yes,
It is. It's
so
the biggest problem we have.
I think, with that kind of, smack you right in the face that, hey, we know everybody, touts, hey, we're gonna grow this tax base, we're gonna diversify the tax base and all this kind of stuff because it's, a convenient thing to say. But the reality of it is, we need to make sure that we have some sort of plan, we have some sort of structure in place, because it's not, hey, if you've got a business where you're welcome here, and I don't mean that from a negative perspective that, we don't want you here, but we have to be choosy. We have to have a plan. We have to determine what we want because the space is limited. And
And I think we can afford to be, so.
yeah, absolutely. We can. Fortunately, yes, absolutely right. We're in an enviable position where we can be selective as to who we choose and what we want. But we need to determine what that is, work with the Kai and figure out a roadmap moving forward, because before we know it, we're gonna, obviously, everything new that comes in is taken away a very limited space to begin with. So and that limits our future growth from there. So we've got to kind of figure that out and move forward from a plan perspective.
Of those like 900 acres or whatever, from the work that he was saying, or I don't know, that we have available.
For commercial,
Yeah. So, from what I can surmise from that though, is that the majority of those are in TIF districts, correct? Or they will be in TIF district.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. So, again, not to get into the rhetoric of the campaign, but everybody says, oh, we're gonna reduce your tax rates. Obviously, that's not gonna happen,
reduce your tax rates or your tax bills.
Well, they said, we're gonna reduce your taxes, right?
Okay,
You
that could go either way.
Tax rates are already, you don't do anything, taxes are already moving in the right direction.
yeah,
But what you're paying is a whole different thing.
yeah,
Well, we dropped our rate 21 cents as a city this year,
yeah.
but I'm guessing you all as residential taxpayers have not seen the decline in
Oh,
your tax.
got
That's the opposite.
Right.
No,
Commercial will.
Commercial
So
too.
you gotta define, is it your tax bill or your tax rate, and is it
Well-
residential or is it commercial?
yeah, they're saying residential, and I'm saying, well, that's not happening unless you can get rid of the school referendum, right?
That's done.
So the point is what are we focused on and
And I think a lot of those good conversations will happen in this comp plan amendment. And I think we need to do some really deep dives into what we think is best, what the community thinks is best in those niche pockets. And we also need to look at, once 31 is gone, what is our next real commercial corridor? Or is it 31 North 38?
yeah, right.
So those are all good
Yeah,
comments.
or if there is one,
If there, and there may not be.
yeah.
Depends on how big a city do you wanna be. I've been waiting to get that answer for a long time. Nobody will answer that question.
Well, I don't want it to be as big as it's going to be now. I mean, but it's going to
That's
happen.
choice. The question is, do you want to be 75,000, which we will be, or do you want to be 100?
Yeah, or what?
100.
Yeah.
If you build the whole township, you're gonna be 100.
Well, it's gonna be 100 at some point. It's just,
Doesn't have to be.
you know. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Okay, Marla?
Okay, well, I have prepared for you, it's what I'm calling a kind of graphic summary of the city's annual financial report, that is required report. And the annual financial report doesn't include population, but I did include some of that, a couple slides from Caleb's presentation to just kind of help round the whole thing out. But the first slide, essentially shows you kind of where we start with our beginning cash balances and ending cash balances. And I did that over a 5-year period, just so you had some reference of where we start and where we end, each year. And let me know if you have any questions, because I don't want to get, too,
No, you're good.
you know, off in the weeds. Then I did a graph for you. The next slide, shows our debt compared to the other major municipalities in Hamilton County, as well as, our principal, interest, and lease payments. And from the report, on Gateway, which is where all this comes from, I included all our different debt sources for you. And then I gave you kind of a supplement to that, which was really from the report. Because those different debts fall off at different times, obviously. They're projected out what we currently have to 2047. I didn't include that in the report. That's that single page that has the Gateway debt report builder on it for you. The next slide shows you our cash and investments kind of historically. These are ending balances, just so you know, rather than the beginning balances like the other slide. So, I mean, I guess I'm very pleased to tell you that our ending balance in 2022 was almost $100 million more than it was in 2018. So I think that's pretty great. I went kind of, I guess I thought maybe a little extra mile to kind of explain, if the public were to look at this, to try and explain the differences between lease rental revenue bonds, economic development bonds, geo bonds. And then found a great report on the characteristics of purchasing and, you know, it maybe doesn't really explain why we make the choices we do, but I think it does. And thought that would be kind of interesting to other people. As well as there's been another section on advantages and disadvantages of municipal lease financing, and that was from a firm in Washington, or a bureaucratic agency in Washington that does nothing but talk about the difference between bonds and leases and
Yeah.
investments. So, and I have that report separately. I think it's noted in the references. But if you'd like a copy of it, let me know. The bond interest and lease debt, I just compared this against the different cities to kind of show, I figured maybe it was interesting to show what's bonded and what are leases, what we're paying in principal and interest, and kind of a stacked summary. And that's when then I got into the population of Westfield. I did include, of course, the AFR is only on 2022, but I did include the tax rate so you could see how it has decreased for us. But the 2022 debt per capita is based on the estimated population from the US Census Bureau against the tax rate. And then the next graph I put on there because I wanted you to see how we grew. Oh, sorry, Chris, last slide, but the bottom chart there. It shows like largely that the population increased due to the southeast and southwest annexations, and that was an enormous time of growth for Westfield. And while we're still definitely growing exponentially, as you can see in, the data here that is supported by an article, we had a 7.7% growth last year, which was higher than any other city, in Indiana. But it shows you kind of how many people we're adding, which I think is important also. So then your next chart is the population increases from 2000 to 2020 as reported by the Census Bureau, again, on decennial census. So just wanted you to see kind of where we are and how we're growing according to the other cities as well. There's a graph in your report that I put it on here as a still, but if you go to this website, it's got a slider on it. So I pinpointed, oh, I'm sorry, I guess I didn't include it in there, darn. Well, it's on, it's just under that chart. And it estimated the population for us. So I didn't make up the number, they did, but it was, in 2025, we would be at the rate, if we continue at the same rate we're at, will be population 68.2 thousand. And then by 2029, if we kept up the same rate year over year, population 92,000.
So utilizing a percentage of growth annually, or is that like really factoring in people?
I'm not sure how they factored it. But it was the worldpopulationreview.com. And then when it didn't tell me until I started kind of moving my mouth around on it and went, hey, this actually shows you what it was. So for the purpose of this report, I just kind of dotted this fill in there, but I don't know if it's the best resource or not. So I have to add that, but if we use somebody else who's working on demographics, I thought it was kind of interesting. So, and I think, Troy, perhaps I touched on the article that you were mentioning from IBJ. It was actually from 2008, where it said, this was right after Mayor Cook took office, and it quoted that we were 59%, residential property made up 59% of the town's assessed value at the time. And that today, so that was 2008, it was 72%. And then I included Caleb's graph from his report, where it shows now that residential accounts for 88% of total gross assessed value. And then,
Do we know where this is coming from? Indianapolis seems to be kind of a quandary. Just maintaining,
Where the people are coming from?
yeah.
We do have some analysis on that. Kai has some data on that, and most aren't coming from, a lot are coming from out of state. A lot of Illinois, a lot of California, not just to Westfield, but to the region. So yes, we do have some.
The bad spell that's cast on Indianapolis is not necessarily, we're not picking up for that.
No, I don't think so. I think we're excluded from, you mean the social issues, the
Well, not only
crime rates, things like
the
that?
maintenance of infrastructure and
Yeah.
driven on their streets, it's terrible.
Oh, it's terrific.
Yeah.
I was inspired a long time ago. We look like that up here.
But that's gonna have an effect on them sometime.
It will. And honestly, as we continue to look forward and plan our future, we need to have a heavy focus on maintenance, infrastructure maintenance dollars.
Yeah.
In Indy's defense, the road calculations that the state has, how they calculate roads and distribution of dollars it's not equitable. So we get the same amount of money for a 2-lane road, for a mile of 2-lane road, as they do a mile of 3 lanes in each direction road. So the state needs to work on that formula, which I know the mayor has petitioned for, not that we want less money, but there needs to be an equitable distribution. If you've got a one-way in downtown Indianapolis, that's 3 or 4 lanes each direction, they're still getting the same amount of money to maintain that road as we do this 171st Street out here.
And just like the community crossings grant that we get sometimes once a year, Indianapolis is eligible for $1 million and Petersburg is eligible for $1 million. How much sense does that make?
That does not make.
Yeah, that's why if you travel rural Indiana today, you'll see their county roads are, for the most part, great
Yeah,
condition.
they're pretty good shape.
Because the legislature is funneling all this road money to our rural areas.
That's the makeup of the legislature.
It is $1 million regardless of the size of your community.
Basically, if you can come up with the maps, you can double it. And certainly in those rural communities, we are a little more competitive here, but we generally get our million. Which is great for us because we're already programming $1 million or more to do the same activity, so we get kind of a bonus million.
Yeah.
Two things, if I can jump in very quickly, not completely sidetrack the presentation here, Marla, but first of all, Jeremy, I'd point out, drive down 166th Street sometime.
Oh, I know. I have.
I hear about that from time to time, and when I say time to time, I mean, what time is it right now? I'm gonna hear about it before I leave, I'm sure.
Yeah.
At any rate, so keep that in mind, but Marla, if I can, and I'm just trying to connect the dots here very quickly. If we were to look at the previous slide, where you were talking about the scale where you can slide and determine based on current growth what we're gonna be. We can take that information that Caleb has, right? We can take that information to determine based on what's already approved. I mean, it's not really it's not much of a guessing game, right? At this point, because we know what's already been approved,
Right.
so we can determine these numbers pretty close to accurately, correct?
Well, I think Caleb was probably very accurate as for that graph. I don't know what parameters they used to design it. So I doubt it was like our building permit rate.
Yeah, so the simplest way to do that math and projecting, and it's variable, of course, like anything else, is there's 2.6 people per new residential permit, and we're doing 1,000 a year, it's 2,600 people a year. At this same projected rate, in 2029 will be at 75,000 people. Assuming the same rate, which we kind of expect a flat line or maybe even a little decline in single family residential.
Okay, thank you.
So the next chart, it was kind of to tell you, what I loved about Caleb's presentation, I mean, it was so specific. But I did in that same, IBJ article, it talked about after the annexation. We were 7.6 square miles incorporated before the annexation. And then we went to 19 square miles after the annexation. And then today, we are about 33 square miles. And of course, Westfield, Washington Township encompasses 56 square miles. So that kind of lends itself, Mr. Fry, to what you were saying earlier about, space being somewhat limited. So then I jumped right back to the AFR. And got you a graph on our earnings and investments over the last 5 years. We're doing a lot better than we used to do. But we are still interested in identifying what money we can invest from the various entities. We feel like we need to get permission and we need to collaborate a little bit better with that, which won't be used right away in order to get it invested. But as you know, interest rates were virtually nothing last year, or in 2021 rather, due to COVID. So this year we're at almost 3%. So we made almost $850,000, which we thought was pretty super.
Yeah.
So then I just took some of the other information in there to let you know that, here's the money that's been I don't know how to say it. The money that has been abated, I guess, and then money that we gave to non-governmental organizations. Just kind of to let you see what was there, because maybe it's more interesting in a graph than it is numbers on paper. So, but that AFR is available to you through Gateway. I included a link in the conclusion for you, which I did not conclude anything more than to tell you what the AFR is and why we do it. And if you would need help, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You have these drop-down menus, you have to go to the county, then the entity, and then, the year. But everything's there for you. If you have any questions about the AFR, technically OW Crone actually does it, but we have a responsibility to make sure it's reported. So just wanted you to have something a little bit more interesting to look at. And then likewise, you've got your total debt by unit report that I pulled off of Gateway, this morning. And it's just to show you when, most of our, debt, you know, what year it falls off, but it's not a drop down. And then, Nathan Fox was nice enough, late last week to send me, just our debt summary. And so he did do 2021 and 2022. That's not included in the report, but you have it separately. And I'm willing to drill down on any numbers that you want, just kind of need some direction on what you would like, but it's been fabulous to go through, old boxes and, old files of information to see that we had a lot of really nice reports put together, and I love to report things, so you tell me what you want reported and I'll report it to you.
Okay.
I appreciate this. I'll throw out there very quickly. I know the information's out there for us. But I like seeing the graph like this with that, the tax abatements.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Is the 641, that, I assume that includes the ARPA dollars that ARPA committee distributed?
It should, I don't think it.
Yeah, I think it does. So what do you look?
Because it was an increase,
Six
obviously.
41 seems high.
Well, as the person that approves the payment to the nonprofits, we don't, the only ones that are on here that are typical annual would be, other than promotional type stuff, going to fundraisers and things like that. DWA has in the past, obviously. I don't know if they will in the future. That's up to council to decide. And then youth assistants are really the two, but Heart and Soul, Janus, yeah, all the Lake Observatory, which is Grand Universe. So none of those are all the ARPA nonprofits. So that's where the majority of that 641 came from. And not that we have to discuss that today, but that, I saw that too, and I'm like, that's a big number. So,
It was,
We
and,
can-
and I should say, we did, let's see, we had, somewhere I noted it, 23 million more. But 10 of that was ARPA funds, so, yeah,
23 million,
I gotta see where I put it.
23 million more in growth in cash?
Yes,
Okay, yeah, if you pull up the annual financial
It
report,
wasn't 23 though.
it's more than that, but that also includes the old, or Union Square garage money that's still sitting there, so there's 12 million there. At the
Yeah.
end of the year, there's still 8 million of the fire headquarters that hadn't been paid, so all those debt bond obligations that we had received distribution for are calculated into that as well. So 20, I would say 25 million of that growth is money that just hasn't been spent on
Just
construction.
waiting, just saying it waiting.
it wasn't just in like an invest, I think it was an investment. account. No.
Can you open that annual financial?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. I will find it for you.
Oh, never mind, sorry. I thought that was linked to the, I thought that was this link on the back. Anyway,
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, you have to go in it and then hit it. So then you want to go to county and hit the drop down menu for Hamilton.
should we switch to 22 as well?
Too far. I got my alphabet.
And then you have to do, yep, city and Westfield.
So the general fund is really 44 million in cash. And then as you scroll down, the fire fund's got some reserves. MPH LRS has reserves. ARPA is 9.1 million, so that's,
Is there any chance, you hear talk about a clawback with ARPA funds all the time? I think that's.
I can't imagine.
There's gone.
Yeah.
We have until the end of 25
To the
to
street.
spend those dollars. So I can't imagine that they do it before then.
Real quick, you mentioned that, what is the time frame where they have to be, you have till 25 to have these spent?
The end of 25.
Okay,
You have to have a plan by 24.
thank you.
Which I believe all of ours are planned.
So we do, and that brings up a subject that maybe we shouldn't get into, but my concern there is we've committed a significant dollars to the YMCA. And we've got the plan,
Mhm.
but we don't necessarily know if that plan's coming together. So I want to make sure that we're on top of that and make sure that those funds aren't at risk for us to just lose.
Yeah, and I haven't been a party to that commitment.
We can get an update from them.
Yeah, from the Y or from Cindy, I think she might have a better pulse on that than I do. So so there's 9 million, that started the year in road impact fees. We know we're gonna spend that this year. Park impact's 5. You've got your tip dollars in there. Scroll down a little bit further. Going, when I looked at this a while, see the lease rental bond for the fire department's $9 million, lease rental bond for the Union Square is $12 million. Those are monies that will be spent, that are already spent. So of the 146, the growth from 125 to 146, much of that is spent, if you will, on
Yeah.
projects that are committed.
And Marla, kind of along the lines of that, I mean, you could graph out, what our normal cash balances are on a monthly basis and, for the,
And I can help you peel out which ones are actual cash balances and which ones are
yeah,
other stuff.
yeah,
Because I think even some of the TIF obligations in there, like Spring Mill Center, so we gave them, TIF incentive to tear down that old concrete.
Yeah,
plant,
I remember that,
rebuild
yeah.
it. So there's a lot of those things, and I'm happy to work with you and
Okay.
kind of mark off ones that are what I call not real numbers.
Right.
that's all I have. Anybody else have anything? Good, okay.
I appreciate it.
We're adjourned.